Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and if you're a parent, especially of young children, I have a real treat for you on this edition of L'Chaim. For I'm pleased to be joined by a wonderful woman who's devoted her impressive professional career to helping parents become better mothers and fathers, mommies and daddies, and helping them think through the values they hope to instill in their children as they become the best each child can grow to be, and helping parents to really discover the joy of being a parent. My guest is Meg Akabas, founder of a consulting initiative called Parenting Solutions. Meg has a long personal history in parenting activities. She's a certified parenting educator. She served as board president of 2 Manhattan schools. Meg also serves on the steering committee of the New York State Parenting Education Partnership. And Meg and her husband Seth have 4 children of their own. And most important for our discussion, Meg has recently authored a new book for raising happy, responsible kids entitled 52 Weeks of Parenting Wisdom. And Meg, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.
Well, let me just explain to you, it's called 52 Weeks of Parenting Wisdom. And when people publish a book, they try to come up with a title that is catchy, and 52 Weeks is catchy. It's not to suggest that each week you read another chapter of the book. My guess is if you're a parent and you care about being a good mommy or daddy, you'll pick this book up, you won't want to stop. You'll read all 52 chapters. And it's not like you do 1 chapter a week and one of the ideas a week. It really is, and I hope, Meg, what I'm saying is something you endorse. It really is a philosophy of parenting. And the chapter headings are wonderful. I'll just give you a couple sentences of what the chapters are called, and I've made notes which one I want to really talk to Meg about. But it's each week, there's another, but it's not about a week. It's another idea. It's 52 ideas, okay? So, I'm just reading, choices, everything in moderation, what really matters, parting thoughts, is anybody listening, no fighting, no biting, inspire confidence. Anyway, if you pick this book up and you're a parent and you really care about what kind of mother or father you are, you will go to many of the chapters in this book, and they raise very interesting questions as well as giving some suggestions. So, Mazal Tov, congratulations for doing a very important book.
Thank you.
So, Meg, to what extent is your parenting philosophy in any way, I want to get this question out of the way, okay. To what extent is your parenting philosophy in any way a product, you believe, of the Jewish upbringing you've had, the Jewish tradition, Jewish values? To what extent does your parenting philosophy reflect a Jewish perspective?
So it does come from my husband and my Jewish background, in that many of the goals that we had for our children were values that are, really central values to Judaism.
For example?
So, for example, respect. Who gives respect? The one who gets respect, the one who gives respect. So, that's a real central theme throughout our parenting. The idea of, self-control, having self-discipline. That's also something that I think comes from our Jewish values, of what we want for our children. And sensitivity to others. That's one real key thing that I really wanted to impart to my children.
What was your own Jewish background?
My Jewish background was that my grandparents on my mother's side were quite observant. And then I grew up in a household which was Jewish, in that I knew my Jewish identity, but we were not observant. Our families were quite assimilated, and so it kind of skipped a generation. Not that I didn't think that being Jewish was important, and I certainly think that my parents instilled Jewish values in me. But we weren't an observant family growing up. And then I met my husband, who really became more observant himself in college. He went to Princeton and roomed with a bunch of guys who kept kosher and were from a community that was more observant. And he really taught me a lot, you know, when I married him. And it was very clear to me that this was something we wanted to pass down. Mm-hmm. You know, I was very close to my grandfather. It was something that was important to him, and I really wanted to carry it on.
That's lovely. I also know that your children go to a day school?
They did. They're now older, but they did.
Okay.
So my children all went to a school called Beit Rabban, which is a school on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And it was brand new when my first son was the age that it was time to go to kindergarten. He was only 4, which was a little early for some Jewish day schools. We felt he was ready for school. And I looked around at some schools and really was having trouble finding the right fit for him. And I remembered reading about a school in the Jewish Week that was opening, and called the Jewish Week and said, what was that school that there was an article about last year? And the person who answered the phone actually knew that it was Beit Rabban. It was founded by Devorah Steinmetz, and she started the school for the same reason. She was looking for a school that would fit what she wanted. And she was an educator who ended up beginning the school. And so my son Shai, who's my oldest child, who's now 25, was enrolled in the school in the second year it was open. There was only 11 students. And it was really everything we were looking for. Mm-hmm. It mixed the importance and the rigor of Jewish studies with rigorous secular studies. There wasn't a choice, a trade-off between one or the other. And it was about being Jewish not just when you're in school, but 24 hours a day, and a very integrated curriculum. So it was quite progressive in the way that it mixed the Jewish studies with the secular studies and worked kids in groups across age levels. And it's a little bit of a leap of faith for us to try a school that was really brand new at the time, but it ended up being the perfect fit for us and our family.
How wonderful.
And all our children ended up going there.
You counsel parents all the time.
Yes.
Do you think there's any difference at the moment between the way middle-class Jewish parents in New York tend to parent from middle-class non-Jewish parents?
Mm-hmm. I don't think I can say across the board that there is. You know, I've certainly seen many Jewish parents who really have an emphasis on learning in a way that maybe is not across the board. But I think it, you know, I think it fluctuates.
Yes, in general, my sense is there is now within a educational economic strata a certain appreciation for being a parent that crosses, quote, religious lines or ethnic lines. And that basically what you have now are lovely young people trying to do their best as parenting in ways, I think, Meg, sometimes is more self-conscious, more awareness is brought to being parents today than may have been true a generation ago. And the other question I wanted to have in this series of introductory questions for you is, do you feel parenting has changed? The process of parenting has changed dramatically in any significant way? And I'm now asking you, you have raised 4 children. How many siblings did you have?
I'm the youngest of 4.
You're the youngest of 4.
4 girls.
When you look at the way in which you were parented, the parenting of, you know, our parents' generation, I'm older than you, but basically my parents and your parents all came from a different generation. Are parents today different than our parents were parenting?
So I would say fundamentally no, because I'm a believer there's nothing new under the sun. But I do think that you're right in that, and I hope that you're right, the parents are more self-aware of how they parent. They think about it more.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, I think that is a significant difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think that they necessarily do things differently, although they might as a result of that. And hopefully they make good choices with all that thought that they do. But I think that, that sort of real self-reflection, maybe, about thinking that there's something to be learned in parenting, that it is a process that you learn, and that there's more acceptance, and I hope this is really the case, there's more acceptance in that it's not all instinct. We don't always know what to do, and there's a lot to learn. And I'm hoping that there's less of a stigma about parenting education.
Yes, yes.
So that, we don't hear this, why does anybody need to read anything, or why does anybody need advice on how to parent? It should come naturally.
I want to quote your very last chapter title, and I thought it was great. Great parents are made, not born. And none of these are hard and fast rules.
Of course.
But what you're trying to say is that you can become a great parent even if you're not instinctively born that way. And experience is a wonderful tool of education as well. But you speak for a moment. Why are great parents made, not born?
Well, we all have to some degree some parenting instinct. And we all, to some degree, have a model. And that model that we had growing up may be a model we want to replicate or not.
Meaning our own parents.
Our own parents,
yes.
How we were parented. But that's to varying degrees. So after that, what happens when your instincts don't work? So to say that we didn't have to think about these things, or why do you need advice? I think is a fallacy. That part of parenting is learning about parenting, and it is a growth process. And just like anything else, that we need tools to help do it. That is part of being a good parent. Everybody loves their child and wants what's best for their child. It's not their intention isn't good. It's that they don't always know how to go about it. And society, to some extent, expects people to just know. And that's really, I think, unfortunate, because people feel like they are hesitant to admit that none of us are perfect.
Right.
And even really good parents can be better. I'm working on my parenting all the time. I'm constantly learning.
Very honest.
So, I think we want to try to foster this acceptance that it's okay to keep wanting to be better at it, no matter how good you are to start with or how difficult it is for you to start with. You can always get better.
I look at some of the things in your book, and I'm very impressed, and I want to push you a hair.
Okay.
Because I think there are things you advise us to do as parents, which in fact do reflect a difference from the way the generation earlier did things. I'll give you a couple examples, see if you think I'm right or whether I'm in some way exaggerating the difference.
Okay.
At one point, there was an adage, children are to be seen and not heard. You have a chapter that you say children should be seen and heard. Talk about that for a moment, and I believe that your instinct here does reflect a difference between what you now understand parenting to be as opposed to what our parents understood.
So maybe that comes from my own particular bias that I grew up in a household where we were allowed to be seen and heard. It was very much encouraged. The dinner table was a place where we were expected to converse with grown-ups and be part of that. We were always invited if grown-ups were invited over to be part of that. And my father would take me to meetings with him. So maybe that was unusual, but that's where I'm coming from.
So for you, there was not much of a difference because you already learned that from your parents.
I had already learned that from my parents.
But you do understand, even your title reflects the adage that is of a different orientation.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly where it comes from.
Yes.
And so I think you're right, that for those in that generation who said children should be seen, not heard, that's exactly what I'm addressing. And we want to have our children be respected for their values. And this is something that was very much emphasized at Beit Rabban, that my children got, is that what they felt and what they thought was important.
Mm-hmm. How important do you think it is for parents to be physically demonstrative, to hug and kiss, etc.?
I think it is important.
I do too. I'm a big hugger.
So I remind, sometimes I'll just post something on Facebook. Did you hug your child today?
Good for you.
I just think that's really, really important.
And what about saying, I love you?
I think that's very important too. And I try and say it to my children every day.
Why is it important?
Because, people receive things in different modes. So just by giving attention to your child, that's wonderful, and I am big on giving attention, and we can talk about that all day. But that, you know, the physical mode and the verbal mode, they all reinforce each other. And so you need to get it in all different ways. And there's something very reassuring about hearing your parent say it or feeling it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the same thing's true about thank you, by the way. I don't think you can say thank you enough, and sometimes parents don't realize it is absolutely essential to say thank you to a child.
Yes.
As you would to another adult. Yes?
Yes. Yes. So you know there's my chapter on manners.
Yes, yes, I love it.
And I do say to make sure that you're modeling that for your child. Do they see you saying please and thank you to other people? And do you use those words to them as well?
Yes, I was very proud of you.
Thank you.
Incidentally, there is an overlay to your book, and you even have a chapter where you say it out loud. You want to be a model.
Yes.
The other adage that people use, and they use it in criticism of parenting, is sometimes parents say, do as I say, not as I do, and we know that never works.
Never works.
It doesn't mean, by the way, that a parent can't be honest about their own failings and foibles, right?
Yeah.
And they can say to their child, I'm not doing it right, and I want you to do it right. But the reality is we learn more from what we see lovely people do, especially our parents, from what they say.
Yes, that's absolutely true, that children learn most by example.
Yes.
So the first thing you need to do is do it yourself. Walk the walk.
Right.
Before you talk the talk.
Yeah. One more area I want you to talk about. At one point, parents thought they absolutely knew what was right for their children. Incidentally, I want our audience to know, what I'm about to say is an area that I feel is very, very delicate, complicated, and complex.
Okay.
You know what's good for your child, and yet your child doesn't want it, whatever it is, whether it's piano lessons or French lessons or whatever activity, and a child says, I don't want to do it. I want you to eat in a certain way. I want you to dress in a certain way. And I'm your father, and you'll do it because I said so.
I said so.
Right.
Right.
And I think there is an understanding among our generation. I'm not talking about my parents now. I'm talking about how I parented, and I think how you parented.
Right.
There was a real appreciation for the fact that my child was a person, a human being. They happen to be littler, younger, but they have an integrity of their own. They weren't my possession nor my object. And therefore there is this delicate balance of, and you mention this in your book, and I want to hear what you have to say about the extent to which a child gets to participate in the decisions that affect them, and to what extent does a parent who brings a lifetime of experience to a question or an issue or a choice that a child does not have the perspective. How does the parent deal with how much do I tell my child and say to my child, in this instance, it's not about your choice. You will do this because I'm your father, and I'm asking you to do this, and I'm telling you have to do this. To what extent does a parent now always say to a child, I want you to be part of the choice, and ultimately you are a full participant in that choice. And I'm saying to you, I feel this is a very complex issue and a sensitive how you draw the line. So I'm very anxious to hear what Meg says.
It's an excellent question, and I have, as you know, a chapter in the book, as you mentioned, called Choices, Choices. I believe very strongly in giving your child choices, and that's the way, especially toddlers. You know, when people tell me they're having trouble with their toddlers, I don't want to do this, and the terrible twos, which I don't like to use that phrase, because giving them choices gives them a feeling of that they have a say in something. But you know, they don't have the wisdom and the knowledge that we have, and they need us to be the voice of reason and to make decisions about things that we should be making decisions about for them. So you want to be very careful to give your child choices about things that they can and should have choices about, and not to give them choices when they don't. And to be clear, when they have a choice and when they don't.
Okay, so give me some areas.
So, you know, I've heard parents say, you know, can you not run out in the street? with a question. That's not a choice. We don't run out in the street. Don't run out in the street is the command. But there's a lot more subtle things than that, of course. So, I think that you might say to your child, I want you to participate in a physical activity. You need to have some physical activity that you do. It can be a team sport. It can be, a sport that you do alone. But we're going to choose something. And you could give them that choice about what they want to try. That could be a choice, for example. It was important for me as a musician that my children all had musical training growing up. And we decided, my husband and I, that would be till age 12. And my children had a choice what instrument they chose.
But they did not have a choice to do or not. They had to be involved with music in some way.
They had to be involved with music. And none of my children regretted that. None of them they're all grateful. None of them were going to grow up to be musicians, and that was fine. I just really believe in the importance of a musical education.
And why 12 and not 18?
Well, it was, as they were getting to their bar bar mitzvah age, as they were becoming an adult. So,
wait a minute. Meg, you're not saying a 12-year-old, 13-year-old is an adult.
Well, they become an adult in the eyes of the Jewish community. And they still don't have...
Is a 13-year-old an adult?
Well, not in terms of all decisions they have to make, but they start to be able to make some decisions that are appropriate for 12 and 13. And that's not all decisions, of course not. But in the eyes of, of Judaism, they reach a level of maturity at that age. And, maybe perhaps it was somewhat arbitrary that we chose the 12, 13-year-old
mark. Well, at one point, a 13-year-old had a very different life than a 13-year-old does now.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But I wanted them to have that musical training for a significant amount of time, but I didn't feel like they had to stick with it forever. My children, most of them chose to actually keep it up through high school.
Did you have trouble with how much they practiced?
I didn't get involved in that. They had to. So I, really believed strongly that it was up to them to be ready for their lesson each week. That's all I asked of them, and whatever they needed to do that, that was their responsibility, and they did.
Mm-hmm. Is there another area? Boy, the way you frame it is so beautiful. You're going to learn something with music. You can choose which one.
What it's going to be.
So you give a choice within a context, but the context is set by the mother and the father. Right. Anything else occur to you? You said physical activity. Are there areas, by the way, in which you feel a child should not have choice?
There's hundreds of them every day.
Give me two.
We make choices about, what nutritional food. Now, you can give them choices about food, again, that stay within a purview of nutritional food. So, I'm not a short order cook, so what I'm serving for dinner is what's for dinner. But we may talk about ahead of time. Should I make broccoli as a vegetable tonight or asparagus? And we may discuss that for things that parents, whether or not you go to school, and all sorts of decisions about how you live your daily life, how much TV you watch, and all sorts of those decisions I think are important for parents to make. Now, something that you said earlier about do it because I said so. Right? There are things that we have to make those decisions for our children about because we have the experience and the knowledge of what is best for them. But I do think that it's important to explain those decisions to children. Just because they don't have a choice doesn't mean they don't need to understand.
Absolutely. I'm not sure the answer "because I said so" is ever sufficient.
I don't think it is sufficient.
Right.
Now, we had a rule in our house that if it was something that needed to be done immediately, that the explanation might come later. So if I asked you to do something, for example, turn off the TV or whatever it was, that you did it. And then I'm happy to explain why afterwards. But follow the direction, and then we'll talk about it.
Yes. So I want to ask you about discipline. Did your parents ever strike you?
No.
Never spanked you?
No. Not that I remember.
Okay. Or your brothers or your siblings?
No.
Okay. That's always a question that huge, big debate. Do you spare the rod and spoil the child? To what extent do you advocate a parent either use corporal punishment in some way, has a right under certain circumstances to strike a child? To what extent do you take a different position?
So I am unequivocal about this. I think that no sort of physical contact other than affection should be allowed in a home. And I have a chapter about that in the book. And it really all goes down to that same point about modeling. So when you show your child that you solve a problem by hitting, that's how I'm going to make you behave, by hitting you. That's how they learn how to solve problems. And if you say when you spend I'm doing this because I love you, well then the child learns to associate something violent, something physical with love. And I I know that there are other ways to discipline, to teach discipline to your child. It's about being self-disciplined yourself, to learn those ways and to be consistent about them so that you don't resort to spanking. Because we know there are other ways that work. There are plenty of people who don't spank. And it's hard work being disciplined and consistent and not losing your temper. But I just don't think there's ever an excuse for it or something that justifies it.
I want to make sure we've pushed you as far as I can push you. You don't think there's ever a reason why a parent should strike a child?
I really stand firm on that.
I want you to know I agree 1,000% with you.
That's really good.
If a child runs into the street, that's your failure. And to spank a child for running into the street when the child, first of all, is probably too young to even understand why it's dangerous. And everything you say is exactly right. Why do you want to teach a child that the way by the way, a child, for a parent, is a huge giant to a child.
Yeah, there's that power
yes,
difference
and
there.
the child is in some way struck by another human being, by any human being. I think everything you say is beautiful and perfect. And I don't believe you ever strike a child. It's interesting. There's a very famous passage in the Jewish tradition which says, and the Jewish tradition does have in it the notion of corporal punishment and capital punishment. And then the Jewish tradition says, if you ever must strike your child, you strike him with a shoelace. Meaning, first of all, you never lay a hand on a child. And second, a shoelace is nothing. Meaning, you don't do it.
Right.
And I think it is crucial, and that there are other ways to keep a child from running into the street. Striking a child is wrong. Striking a child for doing something that makes you angry. And what you said was very important, and I just want to emphasize it. Usually if a parent strikes a child, it's because the parent has lost control.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the message we're teaching, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. I want to hug to death. Never, ever would I lay a hand on a child. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't get angry.
Of course, we all get angry. It's how we deal with that anger.
That's
what
correct.
we want to teach our children,
That's
how to
correct.
deal with the anger.
Yes.
And we're modeling the wrong way if we use physical force. So not only did that apply to us and the way we disciplined our children, and by the way, my husband is the model of never disciplining children in anger. I think
Good
he's
for him.
very, very good at that. So that if he ever raised his voice, it was a controlled raised voice. And I'm doing this intentionally, not because I'm angry.
Yes, he's making a point.
I'm making a point.
And your children knew it, didn't they?
And they knew it. They knew it. They knew it. But that extended, that philosophy of no physical force extended to my children. My children never lay a hand on each other unless it's an affectionate.
Your children don't fight.
Do they disagree? Yes,
I didn't
but
say
they
that.
do
No,
not fight.
I mean fight.
They do not fight.
Yes. My children do not fight either. And there are parents who say to me, I can't believe your kids don't fight. And by the way, I have a brother. I was a little more than almost 4 years older than he was. We never fought.
Yeah.
It wouldn't occur to me to fight. And by the way, I was bigger than my brother. What would I fight my brother for? And it doesn't mean we didn't have issues.
Right.
But to physically fight him, to punch him, and
I think there's an expectation by many parents that that's a natural thing for siblings to do.
yes.
And that expectation gets borne out, and they allow they say, oh, kids will be kids, they're competitive, that's how they get out. No.
Good for you.
That's really the way the home should be a safe place. There should be that's got to be the safest place for a child, that they know they're never going to be hit by anybody. They're never going to be verbally abused by anybody, that we use kind words all the time, and that they're respected.
I love it. Incidentally, can a parent make a mistake?
Of course.
Of course.
Of course.
What's the parent do then?
Says they're sorry
Right.
and admits it.
Right. By the way, that's very powerful.
It's very
For a
powerful.
child to hear a
see
parent say, I'm sorry, by the way, I wasn't thinking, or I made a mistake. I'm really sorry. I never should have said that to you. Because it's not like parents will be perfect.
Of course.
But, there's the Greek sense of perfect. There's the Jewish sense of perfect. And the Jewish sense of perfect is I'm doing the best I can, but I'm always sensitive to what happens if I hurt you. And I never mean to, and I'm really sorry. And I expect that from my children. My children may at times do something hurtful. If it hurts them that they did that, that's all I want.
Yeah.
So I love it. And you used another word I want you to talk about. Expectation. Talk about the power of expectation in parenting.
The power of expectation is huge. I think that we come in with certain preconceived notions about parenting, and you hear a lot of these phrases, the terrible twos, and your teen's never going to talk to you, they're going to turn into an alien. My teens did not turn into aliens. They turned into wonderful human beings that they were all along, that were just engaging and a joy to be with, that when you have these kind of preconceived notions, boys will be boys, siblings are competitive, they're going to hit each other. Kids wrestle, that's what they do. That when you have those preconceived notions, that's what you get. And so the way that you come into your parenting is very important, that you have intention about what you want and what you expect of your child.
What you expect of your child.
Yeah, and what you expect of your parenting. Both of those things. Now, in terms of expectations, I really want to be clear here, because we can get into some murky ground with expectations that parents often think when I say you should have high expectations for your children, that I'm talking about like the tiger mom kind of thing.
Oh.
And I really want to be clear that that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
So
what are you talking about?
I'm talking about expectations on their behavior, how they behave. That's what we can control. We can control very little about our children's interests, their talents, what they're born into the world with, right? They're going to work with that, and we're going to work with that. What we do have the ability to shape is how they turn into as a human being. That's where the expectations come in. So we had an intention when we started out, my husband and I. And the intention for us that we wanted to raise kids that were respectful, who were sensitive to others, and who had some self-control in the way that they presented themselves in the world. Now, self-control might seem like an odd choice there, but it's been shown that children who learn self-control, because babies are born with no self-control, so it's something you really need to foster in children in an appropriate way. You don't expect, for example, a 2-year-old to sit quietly still for 15 minutes doing nothing. That's an unrealistic expectation, but you can help foster that ability to be patient and to wait by giving them small doses of being patient. So you foster that self-control, and that turns into a child who doesn't always have to have what they want. Their impulse control is very good, and that has shown to be, through research studies, to be a very good indicator of a person's success in life.
That's wonderful, Meg. Are children born good?
I think that generally children want to do the right thing.
Meg, I do too.
And that we often assume that they're doing something to be conniving or to get away with something, and that's just not so. Children really want to know what they should be. And that comes back to that whole thing about choices. They say, I want to do it my own way. They really want us to guide them.
Yes.
They need that, and it provides a sense of security for them.
Absolutely.
That is essential. When children grow up in a household of uncertainty, not knowing the rules, not knowing whether they're going to get away with something or not, what flies and what doesn't, that's a very big source of stress for children. It's the #1 source of stress, is insecurity.
And you used a very important word earlier I wanted to speak about. You said it's important for parents to be consistent.
Yeah, this is really hard. And when I talk about discipline in the book, there's a chapter about discipline. I like to use the word discipline talking about the parent.
Yeah, I know, it's very interesting for me.
The parent needs to have discipline to be consistent. Parents have such trouble with this. When you're consistent in the consequences that you provide your child, either good consequences or bad consequences for behavior, and you always follow through, then you see results, and it's very clear to the child. Because if something is certain, children don't do what doesn't work for them anymore. So if they do something and they're not sure, well, she says this, but does she mean that?
Or one day she does, and one day she doesn't.
Then the child never really knows, and there's that insecurity comes in again. So the consistency is really what provides that security for the child when you say something that you mean it.
Isn't that true, by the way, for adults as well? In other words, a good marital relationship works if there's consistency. If every day our husband or wife were different, expected different, demanded different, was upset by different, we would be lost.
That's very true.
As adults, we would be lost.
Right. We rely on that.
Absolutely.
We do rely on that.
And our children rely on it just as much.
Yeah, I mean, they're learning about what works and what doesn't work.
Yes.
And they rely on us to be that guidepost for them. And when we are not consistent, we need to say we made a mistake. That's when we need to apologize and say, you know what, I slipped. I let you do this thing that I really shouldn't have. I meant to be consistent about that, but I wasn't. But now this is the way it is. And that goes to little details like parents who count down, if 3, 2, 1, and then nothing happens. Or, if you, do this, we're never going to a birthday party again. Those kind of, children they take things at face value. You say that, they think that's what you mean. And then when it doesn't happen, you go to a birthday party the next week, they say, well, she didn't mean what she said. And then you lose your validity, and you lose the weight, and so things start to become meaningless.
I agree 100%.
And that's why when parents say, my children never listen to me, it's because the children have now learned that what the parents say is not meaningful.
Oh, very good, very good. I want to come back to the question about children good.
Okay.
You have 4 children. Are they all temperamentally identical?
No.
Each child is different?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do believe that children are born with a certain personality.
Right?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And I feel the parents...
But I don't think it's a good or bad.
No.
It's just a personality.
Right,
yeah.
right. Although, I think that there are certain people who are just everything about them is just soft and lovely, and other people are, their hormones work differently, and there's a certain kind of passive or aggressive. I don't mean aggressive in terms of violence, but how they approach life and how they embrace life. And they're just running all the time. Nothing to do with, there's no value judgment here.
Right.
There's just a kid who runs all the time.
Has a lot of energy.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a kid who just wants to hug all the time. And neither one is good or bad. It's just how they're born. And I believe that if you go to a playground and you go to a sandbox, you will see very young children who will say, would you like to use this? And you'll show children who will say, you can't use mine. But although there is a child who say, you can't use mine, there's another child, same sandbox, who comes with the very open, I'm happy you're here, and what's your name? And I'd like to play with you. And I believe in some part it has to do a little bit with the way they're born, but also I believe that a child would be just as happy to be embracing of other children if they feel they're embraced at home in their life. And how the context we create for our children is reflected in how they relate to other children.
Absolutely.
And I will not accept the fact that children are, quote, born selfish and must be taught to share.
I agree with you. I think that that the context in which they grow up can really foster that natural sense of generosity and wanting to be, part of something else and with other people, and that how we set that context for them at home will really say a lot about how they interact with others in the world.
When you meet with parents, is there a single, or are there 1 or 2 things that you hear time and time again is frustrating for parents? Do they have concerns which, again, it's not to trivialize or to minimize their personal anguish, but that for you, well, you've heard this 100 times because it is one of the most common or frequent problems parents face today?
The today or just any time? Because I think that the big one is my child doesn't listen to me. And one of the things that I talked about before, the child listening to you, is making sure that what you say, you mean. And they will, if there is a consequence, they will listen to you. But the other thing goes back to what we said about respect for the child, that when they feel heard, they'll listen to you as well. So there's a give and take there. And that's important, that we treat our children like human beings. And we explain things to them. They understand reasons for decisions. Children can understand a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yes, so if you had to identify the 1 or 2 biggest mistakes, common mistakes, parents make today? What are those mistakes?
Wow. Okay, so this is a big one for me, and I'm not sure it's one of the biggest mistakes, but because we haven't touched on it yet today and it's really important to me, I'm going to bring it up.
Please.
And that is about being present for their children. So parents not being present for their children. And that partially has to do with technology. And I don't think that it's new because of technology. I think it's always been a problem. Parents can be distracted by things going on in their life. They could be distracted by the telephone, the newspaper, whatever. But now, because technology is portable, and they always have a way to be connected with other people, aside from their children, that I see a lot of disconnect. And it's very upsetting. In fact, it breaks my heart, particularly with young children. So you see parents with babies in strollers who might have headsets on, earphones in their ears, they're listening to music, and the child is there being totally ignored. That interaction in the first few years, face-to-face, you cannot replicate that with anything else. Screen time, anything else. They need that interaction with the parent.
You have a chapter, by the way, that you call Bond Over Books.
Oh, yeah. Reading with your child. I think in the Jewish community that's very valued. You know, and I have hardly come across a parent in the Jewish community who doesn't read a lot with their child.
But that is an opportunity to really pay attention.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
It's the sharing you're talking about.
Yes, and you can use that as an opportunity for both physical closeness and to exchange ideas, let the child be heard, and for learning. But I'm also talking about those mundane moments of life, where you're riding on the subway or you're in the car. Those are such great opportunities to connect with your child. Talking to your child when they're young is one of the most important things you can do, even before they can talk. That's when it's most important, before they can talk. People say, why should I talk to a baby? They can't talk. Well, that's when they're acquiring their language. 9 months is when the most activity in the brain goes on for language development. 9 months. So we don't want to miss that opportunity. Talk to your child, and if you talk to your child when they're young, they'll talk to you when they're older.
That's lovely. I want to suggest one. I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
I think many times parents forget what it was like to be a child. They forget what bothered them about the way they were treated, how they were treated, and they forget how they needed to be feeling that they were their own people, that they had an integrity of their own, and that they wanted, especially as they grew older, and I'm not even sure it's 13, but 16 and 17, and they're in high school, but they're still in the house. And then they go to college, and their parents are now going to be involved with them. Parenting never really stops.
It never really stops.
But obviously, it's more critical when your children are home. But I sometimes am concerned that if parents remembered the things that were important to them as children, 10, 12, 15, 16, they would make different choices themselves as parents, as opposed to this pattern that psychologists point out all the time. Very often we mimic the things we didn't like about the way we were treated.
Yeah.
Instead of doing it differently, it instinctively is a way of almost identifying with our parents, and we now repeat the same mistakes they made, as opposed to saying, oh, I remember how I never wanted I wanted to feel independent. I wanted to be heard. All the things you're talking about, how respect is needed by a child is just a person who's younger. It's not a different animal.
Right.
It's
right.
not
an alien.
It's not an alien. But it's not even a different part of the species.
Right.
It's a continuum. You're a child. You're a human being with feelings and thoughts, and you deserve to be treated with integrity and kindness and consideration. And you simply get bigger, and your concerns get bigger, and your toys get bigger. But that I want to know whether you think I am exaggerating a concern of mine that parents don't remember enough about what they experienced when they were children.
So I think that works both ways. I think that is the case often. And I just want to say that I was very lucky as a teenager to have parents who really respected me as a teenager. I didn't have a teen life where I felt unrespected or have a life where I wasn't given independence. I really was valued in that way, and I was very lucky. But I do see both sides of this work. I see that there are parents who mimic what their parents did, the mistakes that their parents made, or the things that they didn't like. And then there are definitely parents who go the opposite direction. They go the total opposite, too far.
Too far.
So I didn't like that my parents
Absolutely
always told me what to do, and I never had a choice about anything. And so they're always negotiating with their kids. They have no rules. And so what I think is really important, above everything else, is to be reflective about that, which is exactly what you're saying, to remember what worked and what didn't, what felt right, what didn't, and to be thoughtful about the changes you're going to make. But when you're not reflective and you're not aware that how you were parented greatly affects how you parent, whether you do the opposite or whether you do the same, then you're missing a big picture. And I'm not a psychoanalyst, and I try not to go too far into the past with my clients. But I do often just say to reflect, how did you feel about that when you were a kid, the way you were parented? What did your parents do when you did that when you were a kid, and how did you feel about it? And I just want them to think about that and how that might be affecting their. It's important to tell your own story and be able to understand that story so that you can make decisions that will work.
Beautiful. Should parents be friends of their children?
Wow. What's your definition of friend?
Oh, no, I'm not
Okay.
going to help you. I will not help you.
They should be friendly to their kids.
Absolutely.
But no, they're not their children. They're their children's
I
parent.
agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Can you articulate why? But obviously, you and I want to embrace our children and be there for our children in the most wonderful way. But it's never my goal to be their friend.
Right.
Can you articulate why?
Because decisions that parents make aren't always popular in the moment, and friends are people who are people who don't make rules for you. Your friends don't make rules for you. They don't make decisions for you. They're not necessarily teaching you anything. You can learn from your friends, but that's not their role. A parent's role is very clear. They're there to teach their children in the world. I believe that parents are teachers. And that's not the same role as a friend.
I agree 100%.
And there needs to be that clarity.
Yes, I want to add one more wrinkle to it. You say it beautifully. Parents and children are not equal. They'll never be equal.
Mm-hmm.
They're not meant to be equal. Right. Friends should have a certain kind of sense of equality. And it's out of that equality. You have a good friend. One shouldn't be lording it over. It should have no power over you. The reality,
friends have equal roles.
That's correct.
And parent and child are different roles.
Right.
Yeah.
And therefore, I know there are going to be people watching us right now. Oh no, but wait. If somebody says to me, my son or my daughter is my best friend, I
get
know
a little worried.
Yes. No, I know what they're trying to say to me. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's no other way to express that they mean. When I'm with my child,
it's enjoyable.
It's the most wonderful.
Yeah.
If that's what they mean,
and I feel that's why I was asking you your definition of friend.
Yes, okay.
Because I feel that way with my children.
But you understood exactly what I meant.
I knew it's what you meant because
knew exactly.
I get that feeling with my children.
Yes.
There's no one I'd rather be with than my children.
Right.
And they feel that way about each other.
That's right.
Which is wonderful. But
you've done a wonderful job, Meg.
Oh, thank you.
You are wonderful. This book is wonderful. I want you to tell us if there are any people who are watching right now who are in the greater New York area who would love an opportunity just to sit with you and talk to you one-on-one, how do they reach you?
So I'm available through my website, Parenting Solutions, and it's parenting-solutions.com. You can look me up, Meg Akabas, and find me that way. There's a contact information there, and I'm always happy to talk to parents. I mean, that's my favorite thing to do. And this book is available on Amazon.
You have done a wonderful book, 52 Weeks of Parenting Wisdom. I hope you don't mind my saying it has nothing to do with weeks. It's just a philosophy, an embrace of parenting.
The point of the weeks is just that you're patient with yourself about maybe approaching one thing at a time, that you can't be good at everything all at once. And so to take each strategy one at a time, it doesn't have to be a week, of course not. But it's about trying not to be, parents are often overwhelmed. I can't do everything, it's too much to remember. So this is to try to break it down into, bite-sized pieces.
Very nice. Anyway, you've written a wonderful book, and it's been wonderful having you. I hope you'll come back and we'll continue to talk.
I would love
Maybe one time we'll even put you on the phones and let our audience talk to you.
That would be
great. I would get a huge kick out of that.
I would love that.
But Kol Tuva Hazlecha, wonderful job.
Thank you so much.
And it's delicious talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My meeting with Meg Akabas, author of 52 Weeks of Parenting Wisdom. As you heard, you can get it through Amazon. Of course, as always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to this discussion. Do you agree with Meg? Do you agree with me? Are there things you take exception to? We're happy to hear anything you have to say. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. And you know, many times we offer a DVD as a gift to anyone who makes a donation to Jewish Education in Media, the nonprofit organization that helps produce Shalom TV. This time, it's my pleasure to say that Meg has offered that to anyone who makes a donation of $36 or more, double chai or more, to keep Shalom TV going on American television, she will give you an autographed copy of 52 Weeks of Parenting Wisdom. So please, be in touch with us with a tax-deductible donation for Shalom TV, and we'll be honored to send you 52 Weeks of Parenting Wisdom. Our address, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub, L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.